Welcome to the November 10th, 2015 budget hearing. This is the second day of the hearings. Again, we're doing the same thing we did last night. We are going to let the department heads present their budget to us uninterrupted. We'll then go to questions and then listen to the FAB recommendation and then move to public comments. Again, any public comments or questions are limited to 5 minutes per department. So with that, we will start opening remarks. Mr. Landrum.
Yes, as I said last night, all the budget information can be found on the Township website. Just go under, I believe it's under Departments, under Administration, and you'll see Budgets. You'll need to click on the budget information under 2016, and there'll be 7 separate PDF files for your leisure. That's about it for tonight. Tonight we do have Department of Development, Parks and Recreation, and finally Administration. And that's it.
Then we'll start with the Development Services or Zoning. Mr. Stolhaber.
Call us anything, just pay us on Mondays. So. Thank you. The proposed 2016 operating budget for my department, excluding the street lighting districts, anticipates estimated revenues of about $351,100, which is a 2% decrease compared to 2015, and a requested appropriation of $380,040, which is a 10% decrease compared to 2015. The budget worksheets that were submitted that you have in your packages, pages 10 and 11 of the 39, contain notes supporting the proposed appropriations, and of that I will note briefly decreased appropriations of significance of 50% in account 0303, which is printed materials, 55% in 0501, which is automobile maintenance, 30% in account 0513, which is workman's comp, 10% in account 0525, which is the banner program, and 68% in account 0526, which is economic development initiatives. With respect to appropriations, I'll add one note before I get to the rest of it, and that is, per usual, account 0101, which is the zoning administrator's salary, continues to be somewhat inflated in as much as it contains potential legacy or retirement funds should I decide to leave. So, that said, increased appropriations of significance include 67% in account 0108, which is shared services salaries, 16% in account 0504, which is in health insurance, 1,000% in account 0511 miscellaneous, but I'm going to come back to that. 100% in account 0519, which is shared services insurance, 13% account 0520, which is IT support, and 36% in 0521, which is software and software support. I'm going to go back to the 0501 miscellaneous. Happy to report that this request could be modified to delete the CAGES line item within it while increasing the Hamilton County Regional Planning Services line item within it, resulting in a modified request of $1,500. And that's a 15% reduction from 2015's appropriation request. The proposed 2016 operating budgets for the various street lighting districts, which I'm not going to speak of in specifics unless you wish to, and those are contained on pages 13 through 39, anticipate increased expenses over 2015, adjusting assessments so to achieve and maintain a balance in each account equal to 1 year's operating expenses, such adjustments being made during the assessment renewal processes for each district. And then 4 assessment renewals for 2016, those including the Delhi Pike, the Riverfront, Cedars, and Arbor Run subdivision districts. Quick, dirty, to the point, if you have questions.
Economic development initiatives. The difference.
The difference in the economic initiative, I'm glad you pointed that out, Pete. We are showing a reduction in that again. And where that comes from is with what we spent on the land use plan or the strategic redevelopment plan this year, that won't be repeated next year. But there will still be funds, there are still funds requested to facilitate the implementation phase of that, which would include the codification of the recommendations into the to the zoning resolution. So reduced, but still funds in there. I am.
Trustee Seavey?
I'm good, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Fiscal Officer Luby?
No questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to FAB, and I believe it's Brian.
Thank you. Kind of like Mr. Stolbenhaber said, it's pretty short, sweet, dry. Throughout most of the year, we kind of combine him in with administration. As in the last few years, we split it apart for the purpose of the budget hearings. Everything we look at, the big thing that we were kind of glad to see is the rewrite of the zoning ordinances and code that they're looking to take on, which was a fairly big expenditure when you look at previous years, but otherwise everything is pretty cut and dry.
So FAB's recommendation is to accept this budget and
Yes, it
adopt
is.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Next, we have public questions or comments. Anyone have any questions for the zoning? No. All right, next we'll move to Parks and Recreation. Mr. Torbeck.
Thank you, trustees. First off, I wanted to thank FAB, all the members, Administrator Landrum, and Fiscal Officer Luby for all the help. I think our meetings with FAB are pretty valuable to the whole entire process, and I do appreciate all the insight they give us, so thank you guys. Before I start, I want to just go over a couple projects that happened in the park. New swings at Delhi Park, Story Woods, by the end of the year, renovation of senior center restrooms, introduction of conservation areas, open spray park for the year. We're tearing out the basketball courts for additional parking. We got a tree of merit, and we added additional programming. What I think is amazing about this is 4 out of our 6 full-time employees are new to their position this past year. That means almost 70% of our employees were learning a new role or were in a new position. I think that's pretty amazing how they all came together. So it's been a team process this whole entire time, and if they were here, I thank them. I try to thank them every day. So I wanted to get that out of the way before we started. First, I'll go over the revenue. As you can see, in 2015, we adopted a revenue of $661,077. The proposed for 2016 is $677,150. It's a slight increase, and I'm going to go over those line items before I move on to the expenses of some of the increases and decreases we have. On page 13, you'll see 0101 real estate property tax. We have a slight decrease in that of about $4,000 or 1%. Our field rentals, we expect to generate a little more next year. We introduced Game Day USA to the park this year, and we're hoping to have them back. So that's why there's a 20% increase. It was a great tournament, so we're looking to have them back. It has increased over the adopted 2015, but decreased the revised version. Most of that is due to the sale of sale of 2 mowers that we had. That made up a big chunk of that difference. We do anticipate some of the same donations we have for the spray park, some sale of other equipment, but not to the extent of the 2 mowers we had. Summer program fees, you'll see a decrease in there. We haven't really hit that target in a couple years. We do think that with the combination of a couple of the new contracts we just recently approved with RTR Fitness and ICAM Gymnastics, that will bring those numbers back up. So you do see a slight decrease in there. Lodge rentals, we're on target to have more than we had last year, and we think that's going to continue into the following year. And the senior center rentals, we saw a large increase in that, and actually these were predictions. We're probably going to see even higher numbers than we even forecasted for 2015, so we think 2016 will have some momentum going into that year as well. And then the last line item, 0601, transfers in, you'll see an increase of about 9.85%, and that's the transfers in the subsidy from the general fund. The expenses, 2015 adopted was $711,000. We're proposing in 2016 $718,000, about a 1.1% increase. I tried extremely hard to keep this number about the same as last year, and I'm going to go through some expenses, and you'll see that it was almost impossible not to see an increase in our expenses going into 2016. On page 14, account 0102 and 0103. I'm sure when you saw the 964% increase, that kind of raised an eyebrow. What we did there was I talked to Lisa with HR, and we kind of organized our seasonal and part-time positions into more appropriate labels. Some of our seasonals were labeled as part-time, some of us are part-time were seasonal. So all we did was reorganize our seasonals and our part-time. The overall number is within $100 of it, several $100s of each other. So you see that increase, but overall there's really not a very insignificant increase between the seasonal and the year-round. Shared services, 0105, we did see a decrease in that. Our per seasonal part-time, like, once again, since we did reorganize our seasonal and part-time positions, you do see a large change for and a decrease for the part-time, but once again, that does equal out. There isn't a significant change in that. Some of our other line items, you'll see, the number isn't that big, but the percentage is, so I'm at least going to hit that percentage, so when you see it, it's not a surprise. Our other equipment, we had a decrease in that. We bought hand dryers and some new office furniture for new employees. This year we won't need to do that, so we were able to decrease that line item. Fuel, obviously with the decrease in price of fuel and with the introduction of conservation areas, we were able to significantly reduce our use of fuel. So we'll see how that goes in the future. If the prices stay low, we might introduce a couple more conservation areas, and hopefully that's a line item we can continue to save in. Ground repairs, 0703. We reduced that by 66%. Large portion of that budget this year was ash tree removal. We think going into next year we'll probably only need 2 days instead of 4 days, so that's the reason for the significant decrease. 0704 vehicle repairs. You'll just see a slight increase for shared fleet supplies. Not that much dollar-wise, but the percentage does look large. Building repairs on the senior center. We actually had budgeted for last year to replace the HVAC controls. We did not do that this year. We're going to let it go one more year because we did see a decrease in our utility bills, but it could be, attributed to the fact that we had a mild summer and we're having a mild winter. So I don't want to say that we won't replace in the future, but as of right now, with that savings, it would be hard-pressed to spend that money if we're actually seeing a reduction in utility costs. But that could change depending on the weather. 0803, water and sewer. This year, we're fortunate enough to open up the spray park because of donations. Last year, we didn't budget that money in the budget because we weren't prepared to get them. I think we'll receive them this year, so we just put in the budget so we didn't have to reappropriate money into the budget for it. 0818, 0819, or 0818 general insurance. I think about every department it went up, and that's out of our control within our department. Health insurance is another one we've heard department through department with the 19.5% increase. We're seeing that as well. 0823 workers' comp, that has gone up 21.27% as well. 0825 summer programs, you'll see an $8,000 increase in that. I'm proposing this because of the bicentennial celebration next year. The park is an obvious place to have and to host a lot of these events. We'd like to bring back the concert series. We'd like to partner with some of these events, but just the increased amount of events there, we're going to need to budget that into our budget, whether it's extra garbage bags or toilet paper or maintenance before and after an event. I think it's wise of us to throw some money in there to help make sure that those events are successful. (0829) other miscellaneous. Nothing has really changed there. That money's just been put into a different account. 0844 MSD expenses. The number hasn't changed. It's just been transferred from a different account. So we won't be using that account anymore. It'll just be an 0844. Health insurance shared services has decreased by almost 40% because of new employees that come in. Our IT support has gone up 119%. Again, the percent sounds a little bit worse than the actual dollar amount, but that is a shared cost. Software, it's with the new contractor we had come in. The 0836 software and software support, the shared portion of our software had gone up, so that is the increase there as well. 0844, which we just discussed, was the transfer from other miscellaneous, and 0845 is a new line item this year, which will be covering employee processing, which is basically the paperwork and the background checks and things of that nature for new employee hire. Give me 1 second. I got it. I think one of the most important things we did this year was we broke down the budget to really find out, even more so where the money's going and where we're going in the future. Obviously, the big number is how much we're getting subsidized by the general fund. Next year, we're proposing $191,000. If you look at our breakdown, we broke it down into 9 different categories, from personnel, benefits, equipment, supplies, repairs, facilities, programs, shared services, utilities, and miscellaneous. Our personnel and benefits account for about 64% of our budget, which I believe is well below every other department. Our equipment, going back to 2013, but if you even go back farther than that, that line item has steadily decreased, along with supplies, repairs. And Pete, do you want to go to the page we prepared now to kind of discuss? This will give you a better idea. So what we did was we made 2013 our base year. The reason we did that, it was before shared services were introduced. It was before the Parks and Recreation Department took over the senior center. Going to 2015, if you take 2013 as a base and you take out the shared services, the cost of the senior center, and some of the personnel and health insurance that we've had to take on to take care of different services such as the senior center, and you take that out, you really don't see an increase from 2013 to 2015 in the park budget. And going into 2016, even with the increase in health insurance, increased in several line items I discussed, such as $8,000 for the bicentennial or $8,000 for the spray park, we're still able to keep it at pretty much the same levels of 2013. I feel pretty confident that everything we're doing is fiscally responsible. I mean, we're keeping that line is pretty consistent as possible.
If I may interject, that was part of my discussion in the administrator letter. Really focuses on the parks because, as we can discuss, the general fund, in order to balance it, is struggling itself on having a balanced budget because of, in the past few years, it's been because of the subsidy of shifting to the shared services, and now 2016 was the last year of that. So that, of course, helped, but the remaining basically 2 departments that are subsidized is, of course, zoning, which will always be subsidized unless we want to do a zoning levy, which I don't think that would be too popular, or the parks, and the parks is subsidized. With the parks, basically what we're showing, 2013 was when the last levy was ran for the park, same time the fire department was. And when it went down, when it lost, the Parks Department immediately cut, a big cut. Within that half year, or a little bit more than half a year, You see the total expenditures were 566,000, but you see the budget was 609. So it cut, $50,000 out of that budget. And that's the reduced, mainly, primarily, a lot of that was in salaries, that was reduced in staff time. Some of it was maybe in equipment and some extra mulch and things like that, of course. But that's what Josh is talking about. So when you're looking at, we spent 566 in 2013, we only spent 518 projected for this year. So that's less than 2013 actual. Even when you go to what we're proposing in 16, without the shared services and the senior center, you're talking 540,000 compared to actual 2013 of 566. So, time has went by, and we're talking 2016, so you're talking going 4 years back, we are still under what actual expenditures were in 2013. And that includes the additional 19.5% health insurance and the additional, the COLA for the employees that we have. So there's been a big struggle of keeping those of the costs down. And Josh has done a great job, including like he had mentioned earlier, doing inventive things to, a lot of the things were like scheduling was a big issue of making sure who's what, where, when, why, and making timing. You can be, that's management. That's what that's about. So he's done a good job of that, the conservation areas, the additional revenue he's tried to do, the extra contracts with trying to utilize the senior center more with having, now he's got people exercising events and different things going on. That's just pure extra revenue, so that's great. But it all comes down to basically at some point in time, the question has to be asked, in my administrator letter, I basically laid out 3 options. What do we do for the future is, one, do we continue general fund subsidized, which, we're not going to be able to balance our general fund. 2, because, and I'll talk about the general fund after he gets done. 2, we reduce we just reduce the parks. They have to meet whatever their levy from 2005 brings in. We continue with that amount. Or 3 is we consider in 17, well, for 17, basically, we consider in 16 sometime or sometime in the future an additional levy to actually support the parks. I would say that I did the analysis on the amount. It would be about a 27%, 26% reduction in the park budget if they had to go off of just the fees and levy and the revenue that they self-generate without the general fund subsidy. So it'd be a huge cut. Josh has said that would be so many staff members, there would be reductions. This is a scary thing to say, but one of our biggest losses that we take is something that the parks fully took on, and that was the senior center. It is a lost leader, so to speak. And what I mean by leader is that, there's good services provided to the seniors, and it's a place that people can rent and all that. But the maintenance and utility costs of that building is pretty substantial. It could probably $40,000 a year just in utilities and basic repairs. People don't realize how much that building costs just to operate like that. So there would have to be some hard decisions, of course, to balance the budget within just the parks budget itself. And of course, then, you're going to have to be asking about, we don't have staff to line the fields and drag the fields and all that stuff. That I will say this, one thing, I've gotten compliments, and I'm sure the board has heard too, that, like game day when they came in, they were so impressed with our facilities as far as in the fields, and man, they were ready and they were done, and that's an expectation here in Delhi. That's great. That's great that means we've done such a good job, it's now expected. Well, if we had to reduce, that expectation would definitely have to be lowered. Josh, I don't know if you want to talk more about what kinds of things would change?
Well, you can see up there with 2016 proposed no subsidy, just the reduction in personnel alone, not only, are we losing people, but, what services do we suffer from losing those people? Our maintenance, we talk about our conservation areas. We'd have to introduce a lot more conservation areas. We're talking about, our ball fields, what kind of care we take care of them. You're talking about dragging them less, lining them less. Our spray park, do we, close it for the year? I mean, don't even worry about trying to get, donations. The senior center, which Pete discussed already, but, we're talking about almost a 30% cut in personnel, and we're already at, that's 60% of our budget. Could we do it? Yes. But at what cost? We have to be prepared if that's something we were going to take on, to realize that there's no way we could keep the parks at the level we're at right now. The dramatic changes would come, top to bottom, as far as, what we do, how often we do it, and where, what properties get the attention. I mean, that's the biggest concern, is there's just no way to keep that level of standard that we have now.
And really, what's driving this change is the change to the general fund. What drove shared services? What drove that to look at, hey, why are we paying all these expenses out of the general fund? Now, me being a financial background, I like accounting for things in the proper fund that should be accounting. So even if you're subsidizing somebody, I still like the expenses to show up where the expenses really belong. But prior to that, it was no thought of the general fund helping out every single department, and they, at one time the general fund was paying for the mechanics. General fund had one car. Why would it pay for all the mechanics' salaries and benefits? For especially when fire and police are the primary users. It paid for all the HR costs, all the payroll costs, all the, a whole bunch of other costs, all the IT costs. And, it wasn't really much thought of when an actual subsidy like the park, since the park's been subsidized. But when things changed from the state, the estate tax, the local government fund, that created, about 65% reduction from 2011. Does anybody go to work and somebody says, hey, we're taking 65% of your pay you've cut? I think you have to make changes. Drastic changes. And, the good news of that is that the general fund, the former boards, I think it's just Delhi in general, have been very conservative and savers. And that is what is saving today. So we are able to still help out to a certain degree. But what the big change is, and why we're discussing this, is that, I could show you, and this is part of the general fund, but it's all together. General fund has only 3 sources of main revenue, and it's really easy. The property taxes, the local government fund, and cable franchise fee. And it accounts for 80-some% of the total revenue of the general fund. And the thing is that those 3 revenue sources are flat. Property taxes are declining a little bit. So, thus the economic development to help that out. But with that, in aspect, the fund reserves that we do have in general fund, that's the question. How long do we continue to drain it? Because it's going to be one of those things that in the past, and there's a chart in the administrator letter where I give I think it's 16 years of the general fund cash history to balance. And you can see, we used to bring in three point some, almost $4 million a year, and now we're bringing in 1.1. You're not going to have, and I from the perspective, and don't mean to get political, but the perspective of, we make money on somebody dying, the estate tax. I get that. I get that. They always say there's 2 things you can't avoid: death and taxes. And death taxes then too. But at the point when the state did that, we had no alternative to make up anything, or to substitute, or to to increase in sales taxes that you can do, or other options that other cities or county or anything that, some of the counties started getting their percentage of the casino money, which hasn't been as great as they had hoped. But they had other ways of assisting, and with the main source of revenue being off of levies for the township, those things are just pretty well flat and are hard to make up. So all said and done, I think tonight here we're trying to show that the Parks Department has leaned down. I will say though, I did say into the administrator letter, and I think Josh has heard this, we've discussed this, is that before Josh took office, the board did a reorganization piece, and that was kind of a first step of reorganizing, knowing we need the right people, the right amount of hours, with the right jobs, with everything, and we've started that. I think that was a good start. Now Josh has been here for a year now, and he's presenting his own budget. Last year he was here presenting the former director's budget, and he's been able to learn a lot about different things and what he wants to change. I think very shortly we probably do need to discuss other changes in the parks that that can help save some additional, and that's not going to make up a $200,000 deficit, but we still have to do the right things that can help us, because we do need help in other ways, and I'll go ahead and bring it up as an issue. We do need to and what's harder is, yes, we got higher expenses like health insurance, and we got all this other stuff that is hitting everybody. But one of the things the park has that really nobody really has to deal with is the increase that we're seeing, and Chief Howarth isn't here, but Jeff is, Lieutenant Braun, is that the things we're seeing in the park with teenagers or even older young adults that are, from vandalizing, that are causing havoc. We want our parks to be a safe environment, so that a young mother and the child can walk through the park and leisure through and not feel intimidated by a group of kids that are swearing and cussing. And I'm not going to say that's the usual, but we have seen an uptick in that, and that's of a concern for us. Now, one of the things with that is, okay, we could go all night with that, and I won't. But we've had many discussions on that. If we ever would get additional funding, what we would need to do. One of the things, though, besides having, and that's a further discussion, but one of the things that to help with being seen in the park is that after 4:30, basically, there's besides the softball, baseball coordinators that are contracted through us through the fees. There's nobody representing the parks after hours. Well, that's bad. Who's our eyes and ears, and where's our customer service? Where's the people to say, oh, okay, I know I'm not going to approach this rough group of people misbehaving, but I got the phone to call the police, instead of waiting on the public to take care of that and all that. So a lot of times it's being visibility is a big issue. And yes, I think there's discussions that need to happen on I think some of the proposals that we showed when we were estimating this 2017, and that's a very rough number. We got to critique that more, but that would include some funding for probably 2 part-time. Our ideas was like a retired policeman that could be sworn in by our police department to be the park rangers, so to speak. It's just a necessity. Our police department has done an excellent job at immediately, something goes down, they have been there. I give it to them. It is part of the township, no doubt, but we also can't have them spending 24/7 there, so to speak. But they need a little help with eyes and ears, and I think that's what we would try to do in that. But so just, in a matter of perspective, when you look at this chart here and you look at the net to the 2013 adopted, And remember, the net is because the 13 didn't include the senior center and the shared services. The net of 649,000 on the 2017 column, if you compare that to the gross adopted in 13, 609, with all the health insurance increases, with additional staffing to help with safety, security, all this other stuff, you're only talking a 6.4% since 2013. Yeah, so in other words, and that's just rough numbers, but in other words, we're not like saying it's going to be a 20% increase to do all what we want to do. No, we're just still talking about to see some improvement, some safety, security improvement. A lot of things that Josh wants to do in the future and that he's trying to do now is offer programs, but programs that self-fund themselves. So they're reimbursable. They join a class or something, they pay for whatever, and that helps reimburse, the actual event. And we want to get, part of the, one thing we have to remember is this, the parks, and it has been confirmed, the economic development plan that we have has clearly stated a couple of things. One is a resource, of course, Mount St. Joseph University, but the biggest thing, and which is in direct control of the township's hand, is the park system. And it's right off of the Delhi Pike and right next to the #1 primary redevelopment area that we hope to see redeveloped. So to ignore this is almost like we need to make sure that we're doing things right here, because that will help continue to attract. One of the statements that it blows me away, but it is very true, is that when people come to the parks off of Foley and they'll spend all day at Ball Diamond 1 and tournaments and stuff, and then I've literally heard this, I've been told this, that people turn to them and say near the end of the day, after they've been there 8 hours or so, hey, do you know where there's a place to eat around here? And because they don't know the Pike exists up there. And that's something else we're talking about, signage, a simple signage, hopefully get it up maybe this year, and redirecting the post office to our address, so that Google and things like that will bring them in through Delhi Pike instead of Foley. But anyway, all that being said and done, there's no decision or anything need to be made, but we are open to questions from you. We just know that we have a little bit of time, that if the board, to get public feedback on what the will would be of the board this year, with the primary being, and this is stated in my administrator letter, the primary being in March. The next election is actually in August, which would make us the very first, May 1st, May 2nd would be our deadline of filing any kind of thing to put on the ballot. Again, nobody likes tax increases, but I will say that people are very supportive of the parks. They have let it known that they like it. Anybody who's been to the park on the weekend, you can't get a parking spot. We are doing some improvements. The biggest improvement, and which I can talk about, TIF, we are repaving the park in 2016, and that's part of the basketball area that will be extra parking, and we gain in 30 spots or something like that, 25, 30.
Something like that. We're still
Depends on how
depends
they
on how we
stripe it.
if we can restripe the whole entire parking lot and reconfigure it, it might be more than that. But 20 to 30 is a safe number.
So I think that was, we said that. And then now also, and I'll just shift this, is that the parks now manage the recycling grant, which that receives $10,000 in subsidy as well. That's something that used to be self-funded, but the cost of the dumpsters and different things has gone up, and actually the grant money that we used to get has gone down because people now have, it's based on your tonnage of recycle, and now other communities, even Colerain now, is going to all being recycle at the curb, at the homeowner. and Cincinnati did the same thing, I believe. So they're collecting so much more tonnage now that they're getting a higher percentage of the grant money, which has reduced ours. Nothing has changed at ours. It's just others are now collecting more because they're doing curbside instead of bringing it to a centralized location. I will say that ours, just for people's information, we do dump our recycling 3 times a week. People are amazed. They think it's because every time they come there and it just was dumped this morning and it's 5 o'clock and it's full already. And we would appreciate if people would not set stuff outside the dumpster and help us out by pushing down. Yeah, Dan will be the first one. He's our dumpster extraordinaire. And so he helps clean that up, and Public Works does as well. It's a big task to help keep that place nice and neat before the wind starts blowing and you have trash everywhere. Other than that, I'm done. I said enough.
Trustee
Thank you.
Seavey?
Well, Josh, I compliment you on your budget because you're working on a levy that's 11 years old. And since the time of that original amount, not only did we add the senior center to your budget, but there's also been a change in the number of acres that's maintained by the park department, and there's also the shared services. And just for a minute on shared services, and putting this as simply as I can, it's not that the general fund wouldn't like to be the source of all. It's the fact that the general fund is no longer replenished at the level that it used to be. And that's the problem. And I think Pete pretty much identified those areas where the general fund has taken a hit. And consequently, we have gone to shared services. And shared services is a typical way of accounting, putting all expenses to the department as they're used. And I totally not agree with you, Pete, with that method. But the subsidy of the general fund it's just can't be sustained. So I compliment you on your budget, but I also want to compliment you on one other thing, and that is getting time management, work management, personnel in place where they need to be, because that's always been a difficult piece inside the park department, and I think you have done an excellent job of putting that together. When the levy went down, was it 2013 or 2013? There was a lot of mistrust, misunderstanding, either right or wrong at the time. And I think you are doing an excellent job to be honest, be clear, be transparent with what's happening in those parks. And I congratulate you for that. And hopefully, we can continue with that. I agree with Pete on safety services in the park. I have a difficult time, and Josh has heard me give this speech, so he's going to go. There she goes. But I have a difficult time putting more investment into equipment and pieces in the park that are constantly torn apart by vandals. I wish we had the number of work hours that your people have put in on removing graffiti, putting out trash fires, re-putting the trash cans up, putting the picnic tables back in the shelters when they've been stacked someplace in the woods. It's difficult to put investment into something that people don't respect. And that's where the safety services comes in. And I think we'll work on that further, but good budget, good information, thank you.
I do have some questions for you. Under the revenue page, which is page 13, the revenue's 40%. Obviously, we made the decision last year to get rid of the concession stand. Do you know the numbers that Kona brought in for revenue this year for us?
Yes.
And what were those?
0. Besides the money they paid up front to be a contractor in the park, they did not bring in any additional revenue.
Okay, because we had it on a contingency basis where we get a percentage of their revenue.
Correct.
So they basically broke even
They didn't even break even.
They lost money.
They lost money.
Okay, but we didn't lose any money, obviously.
We did not lose money, no.
Okay. Is that because Kona, their service was poor, or is that because the parks may not be able to sustain that type of model?
I think it's probably twofold. I think Kona specializes in a mobile unit, so having them going to a brick and mortar standalone was difficult for them. They've tried it at other places and they've had some success, but I think our regional person had never actually been in a brick and mortar place, and he was finding that the mobile unit was more successful, so he was pushing more of his resources towards the mobile unit and kind of pushing the concession stand to the side. I think one thing we did learn, though, was there's this need for some sort of mobile, whether it's a golf cart or whatever it may be, but I think if the concession stand were to add a mobile part to its selling, where we went to the people instead of the people coming to the concession stand, because it is limited by its location. It doesn't reach the back fields, it doesn't reach the playground. If we had something that went out to the people, I think that would be a model for success. So I think it could be twofold, the location of where it's at, but I think we could rectify that by adding something mobile. But I think there's also a component where Kona just wasn't capable of managing it. That was probably one of the hardest parts of the year this past year for me, was managing Kona. It was supposed to be, this problem-free solution turned into more managing for me than it was if my normal employees were in there. So,
Do you have another company that you're looking into or that you're going to work with and maintain the same model, or are you looking to switch the model?
We've reached out to a couple people, local people, not large franchises, people that care about the community, people that live in the community, people that have done similar work within the community, and looking to have them contract them out, but also part of that contract would be adding a mobile component to it to make sure that, obviously we want them to succeed just as much as they'd like to succeed. And me knowing that that is something they would need, that's one of the first things I said. If when I meet with these individual people that might be interested in taking it over, is we need something mobile. We need something to get out to the people, whether it's softball, soccer, wherever it is, we need to get out to them. It's just, the footprint of the park, it isn't conducive for sales at the brick and mortar location. We need to get out there.
So even if we had the concession stand open, we staffed it like we did before, we'd probably lose money on that aspect.
I think if you did not add a mobile component, we'd be dealing with the same issues in the past, which is, not a very successful concession stand. I think just in today's society, no one's going to walk from the backfields all the way to the concession stand. And, they might as well walk up to the pike. But if we had something that came to them, a friendly face, I think that would be a big part of seeing success with the concession stand.
All right, the other thing, on the revenue page, I see the lodge rentals went up 4.5%. The senior center rentals went up 11%. 2 years ago, the board changed the fees for these rentals before your time. A lot of naysayers said that by making it free for community organizations and lowering it for residents, we'd actually lose revenue. But 2 years later, we're actually seeing the opposite. It's going up. Do you know, in your opinion, why are we seeing an increase in revenues for rentals?
We're definitely seeing an increase in revenue due to the prices. We're hitting a target, not, a lot of your just rental facilities outside of Delhi Park, they're hitting a different demographic. We're offering an affordable location for people to host whatever it may be. So instead of renting out a hall for thousands of dollars, we can host you at Delhi Park for a very reasonable price. So there's no doubt that price point strikes home with a lot of people. That's one of the first things they say when they rent is, wow, I can't believe how affordable it is. And we do offer a lot of, we're very flexible with what we offer when they actually hold an event. So, we work with them, we make sure that whatever they put on is best for them. So I think there's a component of, our customer service and making sure that we're flexible with them, and the fact that the price point hits, a lot of the demographic of whether it's a baby shower or whatever it may be, we're able to do that where normally they wouldn't be able to afford somewhere, so they just have it at home.
Last year, previous years, the Hamilton County Sheriff would handle the litter on county roads, and last year they implemented, $2,500 that we have to pay. Is that in your budget this year?
That's in the recycling fund.
Okay, that is. And that's
Yes.
the 10,000 we saw up there, or
That's part of it, yeah.
part of it? Okay. So I just want to make sure we were doing that again. Pete talked at great length about the levy, potential levy. We basically have three options: do nothing, cut 27%. One option is do a levy, or third option, make other cuts in the parks, which potentially the senior center. I know we've had some discussions, an idea for the senior center of leasing it out maybe to the seniors for $1, subsidizing them for $5,000, giving them $5,000 to help operate it, but they would be solely responsible for it. Have you talked to the board about that?
If I talk to the senior board,
Correct.
no, I haven't had a chance since we've spoke just because of their days out. If that's something that the board and Administrator Landrum and Fiscal Officer Luby thought was something that we would want to find out more about, I'd be more than happy to talk to them.
Because under that, and I'm not saying I don't know what my fellow trustee and fiscal officer are thinking, but if it costs us $40,000 utilities and maintenance on the building, and we're receiving $6,000, that's a loss of $36,000. Even if we give them $5,000, we're still ahead of the game, and they would be responsible for it, and they wouldn't have to pay any rent. I mean, so
Well, I think the last thing anybody wants to see is the senior center close.
right.
I think, if we're up to the point where we have no other choice, what can we do to keep it open? I think that is probably the most viable option. If a levy weren't to pass and the subsidy wasn't coming from the general fund, I think that is probably the most viable solution is, how can we help the seniors run the center by themselves? And I think that's definitely an option, and I'd be more than happy to explore it with everybody's approval.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, Fiscal Officer Luby.
Josh, just in comment to the senior center, when I look at the revenue minus the expenses, it looks like we're only 13,000 in the hole. So I just wanted to make sure that I was looking at that correctly. And I guess that as far as supplies and labor, obviously we don't allocate any of your time or the guys, to the senior center. So, just looking at it directly, it looks like about 13,000, but obviously there's an unknown number there as far as labor and other costs.
That is, the number you're seeing is just utilities and just cost of paper supplies. It doesn't take into account any salary. It doesn't take into snow removal, salt. It doesn't take into account landscaping. It's strictly just utilities and direct supplies such as toilet paper, soap. But it does not take into account anything else.
Okay, thank you.
And next we'll bring up Fab, Charlie.
Thank you. Also would like to note that Pete Feitner and Kevin Kappa were also part of the team that looked at the parks budget. Again, Josh did a great job, this being his first year doing this budget for the parks. We were very pleased with his work on that. He had everything very well organized, was able to answer all of our questions. So again, our compliments to him. I think it's important to note as we have a great deal that this is basically just a real basic operating budget for the parks. There's really no frills, no extras in here. So again, I think they're doing a great job with managing what they have. So we talked about the salaries and or just a 1% increase in the salaries. The overall expenses are only 1.1% over the 2015 budget. And that's after we talked about all the things, the added expenses that they do have to absorb this year. So I think with that, we were very well satisfied and would recommend this budget to the trustees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll move to any public questions or comments with regard to the Parks Department. All right, then we will move on to Mr. Landrum with administration.
I think I gave half of my speech already. Start off with the general fund. Here's just, and this is on page 8 in the administrator letter, but just gives you since 2001 the beginning and the ending cash each year of the general fund. And, it really does show the picture in 2014, 15, and of course 15's estimated, 16's proposed estimated. But those last 3 years of 14 through 16, of course, are showing subsidies, and basically it shows the revenues, the line item you can see. If you look at 2013, $2.5 million in revenue, and 2014, round up 1.2, you can see the revenue literally fly out the window. Actually, the change in law became effective the end of 2012, but because of estate taxes that take forever to go through courts and probate and different things, 2013 we received a estate tax about $1.2 million, but the law actually changed in 12. So that's just the kind of tells the story of what has happened to the general fund. The 2016 general fund, the revenue, I can discuss the revenue here real quick. Basically when I'm looking on page 1 of 25 under the administration tab, general fund revenues, the real estate property tax, it shows up 10.27%. Well, don't get too excited. It's not from actual. What that is we went ahead and did the last couple years of delinquent taxes that we get. So for the first time, we're actually budgeting for an estimated number of delinquent taxes. The actual baseline property tax is about $240,000, which, if you know, towards the adopted of 15 was $245, so that's a $5,000 loss in the base of the property tax revenues from last year. Sidewalk repairs is up 20%, but that means there's probably a 20% increase. That means Ron's wanting to do the sidewalk program, so we expect to get the assessments and where people write checks for their sidewalk repairs in. So we're doing more sidewalks next year. Local government fund is up a little bit, 7.2% compared to what we adopted. That's good. I think that's just more of the taxes that have the state is increasing or is receiving, and that's the share. Interest bank account up 2,300%. This is due to Fiscal Officer Luby doing a great job. When we switched banks this year, now we're with Huntington. The checking account that we had with our former banking institution was very, very, very minimal percentage of anything that we received. And although this is still, you're only talking $10,000. Hey, we'll take $9,000 or $10,000 all day long. The bank now has a kind of a joint savings account to the checking account, which Jim has been doing every single month, has been shifting money back and forth between the savings account that acts as like an investment savings account. So he's been transferring back and forth between the checking and the savings, what he thinks we can keep over in the savings and gain that higher interest amount. We've already seen it this year. We're getting, last year, you're talking we only, I think, 14 actual was $780. Well, we're getting over $1,000 every month now. So 1 year, in 14 we didn't even get 1,000. Now we're getting 1,000 every single month, just about, is what we're pretty much estimating. So good, kudos to Jim on that, and he's doing those bank transfers every month to keep up on that. Next, basically moved parking up to a little bit. The officers are writing more and more tickets on some parking and enforcing handicapped and different parking, which should be happening. People shouldn't be doing that, but we are seeing an uptick. I didn't fully move that revenue up to the actual because it's just an unstable number to go with. And then when you look at the last couple revenues, the 10% rollback, homestead, 2.5% rollback, those are all property tax related, and you can see down almost 2.5% for each one of those revenues, and that's because of the loss of the revenue for property taxes. When we go on the expenses on page 2, basically, let me hit on the big ones. We got some stationery. I mean, it's small amounts, only $700, but it shows 20% increase. Well, really, what we did is I think we were paying for the paper for the copier in a different location, and now we're paying for the paper out of the office supplies. You see a lot of different big dollar or big percentages, but there's really no too much dollars behind it. Fleet supplies, we moved most of that to Public Works Department. Computer equipment, we were able to reduce some on that. Office equipment, able to, there's no big, in case something else like another shredder or something like that goes out on us, or a chair breaks or something like that, so we're able to reduce that. Health insurance, it is up 74.36%. That reflects the increase plus an additional person coming on to the plan. If people know, general fund is really simple. There's myself, there's one administrative assistant, and then there's 3 trustees and 1 fiscal officer, and then I think it's under 1 FTE equivalent for shared services. So it's not like we have a ton of staff or anything like that on the general fund. It's very, very basic on what salaries are paid under the general fund. General liability, I will say this is one, like Tom mentioned, that he will have a correction. There's a few corrections that we will be, not corrections, adjustments, because they were what they known, and we have to lock in the budget for this process, this purpose. And so there's some adjustments. And general liability, this is one that actually the cost will be more like $19,000 for the general liability instead of almost 11. So that 44% reduction is going right back up. Go on down. Legal counsel, labor, that's going down 66%. That's only going down about 10%. At the end of next year is probably will begin labor negotiations at the end of next year, so I don't expect too much hitting early on, hopefully not. In legal counsel fees, that is up slightly, 38.5%, which is about $7,000. Most of that is the additional. We have Dave Lane, our director, our law director, is on retainer, but in addition to that, there's charges in above the standard hours, which most of that is through zoning, and people understand the nuisances take a exceedingly amount of work on that. So that's the fees above that. Also, though, in that line item is about $6,500 in estimated charges for economic development, and that would just be in case we need an attorney to review any economic development plans or anything of that nature. Election expense is down because actually it was a lot down from actually what we budgeted last year, thinking that we had to pay for this year. In 15, we thought we had to pay for the levy of the police levy and elections, and I guess because there's state issues and county issues on there, it was a much smaller number. The 17,016 is estimate for this year. It's always a year behind, so the elections we just had, it's just an estimate. We really won't know. It's probably, hopefully, be a lot less than that, because there was 3 statewide initiatives. There were other issues on that, and the more issues there are, the share of the cost goes down, 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 down. So hopefully it won't be that much, but there's really no way of us telling that number right now. Consultant fees, there was an increase in that. One of the most important things we're finding out is making sure we have representation at the state level. So this is helping us, assist us in having a representation, bringing us things that are pending in court. Court too, yes, but pending at the legislation at the either House of Representative, at the state. It could be a federal issue, I guess, but it would trickle down to the state level. So we got this includes representation, which we will be even working with this week on that. On to the next page. I'm just trying to hit the bigger dollar one. Like I said, some of these percentages are just, there's nothing real big number really behind it. The transfer out is down 11.2%. That is because the only transfer subsidies that we have is the parks, zoning, and $10,000 for the recycle. So there's no other departments now being subsidized out of the general fund. Other improvements, sites administration right below that, 0205, down 98.15%. Well, that is because that was the signage sign program for the two welcome signs, so that was a one-time expense, so that has now been removed. Telephone administration, down 41%. That's $10,000 down. We had budgeted, as you heard, the police department talked about it, the new phone system. Most of the dollars there were from the one-time expense of buying the equipment. So that's what that was for. Our actual probably monthly bills actually has gone down in savings from that. And let's see. Overall, then, basically, shared services were down for us, and of course, shared services can differ year to year. But overall, the general fund expense is down 11.37%, 11.4 here if you look at this, and that still does give a proposed deficit of $217,000. And there again, I did want to show this. I mentioned to this, but the three top revenue sources account for 80.3%. And you can see property taxes are slightly declining. Local government fund is a little bit of an increase, but remember that's after them cutting at 50%. And cable franchise fee is the biggest secret, and we won't talk any more about it. Fab knows what we're talking about. I can tell you, a cable franchise fee is just one of those things that the state doesn't see the money. Those fees are mandated by the state, and they come directly to the township. So Time Warner Cable and Cincinnati Bell, and I think there's one other that we get directly. I'm all for, trying to cost of business and trying to get people to do business in the state of Ohio, but if they were lobbied hard enough and the state of Ohio looked at that fee and said, we don't receive a dime of it, let's just wipe that out. Well, if they did that to the township, we'd lose 30% of what's left of the 65% that they already took of the general fund. So that would not be good news. And all other fees are just all the miscellaneous fees, about 20%. Here's kind of a personnel costs, between the budgets, you're talking about 2.1% in total personnel costs. You're talking that includes the 19.5% in the premium increases and all other, I think 1% COLA. Basically, you see a lot of minuses. We're trying to adjust. I think legal professional services, that was a little bit budgeted for the economic development and for the representation at the state level. And so overall, like I said, 11.4%. Now, just want to show you the bottom here. The bottom there basically is showing that without the park subsidy, the zoning updates, of course, that's one-time expense that we'll get that done next year. And then some tweaking of some, very conservative interest and cable franchise fee revenues that we have. Basically, we could balance the general fund. So that's the good news. It's not like it's impossible. It's impossible with the subsidy still being provided, but it is possible. Information services, those are on page 14 to 16. Really, Patty does a great job, our IT director. of keeping us. There are so many systems. She just gives an overall systems update. That's part of the shared services that she provides. She is one of the people that are in shared services. Of course, the cost of software and software support and IT support is all shared services. Bond retirement fund, that's page 18 and 20. You know, we only have the one bond fund that we refunded in 2011, and that's just a pass-through account. It is funded through TIF and then paid out of the bond retirement fund. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the TIF fund, which I did kind of make a chart for you guys to look at. I can send it to you via email, but this kind of put it as a simple chart. Because this is not in your packet this way, so this kind of sums it up for you. Your debt service, basically, you know, you have the bond that I said. You got the two OPWCs, Ohio Public Works Commission. So those were 0% interest loans. And the Greenwell Firehouse loan, we don't know how much that's going to be exactly yet. We're still fine-tuning that. But we do know that probably January, February, we would have to do the borrowing. So therefore, we know in 2016 there's going to be debt service to be paid on it. Projects, I think the police department's already talked about that. There's 3 cruisers, $118,000 as part of the replacement schedule that we have. Fire department, they have some protective equipment. Ambulance, which we talked about a rechassing of one ambulance, which, believe me, we're saving all kinds of money there because we know now there's about $200,000 for a new ambulance. So with being able to use the back of the box, reuse that, we're able to cut that cost in half. Fire equipment, $31,000. If you remember last night, Chief Campbell said some things about applying for some grants. That $31,000 represents for the scuba and some other grants. That would be the cash match portion. It would be in excess of $100,000 if it weren't for, you know, the potential of the grants. So it's simply just a cash match. The firehouse project, $888,000. For the last 3 years since I've been here, it's been in the TIF budget for the firehouse, but we never have really used it. So I put that in a reserve account, reserve account, reserve account. It's not really a reserve account. It's just accounting for the information on a spreadsheet that, hey, we didn't spend that. So we'll kind of bookmark that as savings. And the true savings was about $848,000. But there's an additional about $40,000 in that number, and that's including $35,000 to finish KZF, what we contracted with our criteria architect to help us finish and manage the project, and another about $5,000 to Frost Brown Todd for our legal work. Park, we talked about that. Clearview paving, $450,000. It's a lot of pavement. We will see the maximum. Ron could talk about pavement all day from Public Works, but this will help us drive the overall cost of what we're doing on our roads and projects down, hopefully, and hopefully we have some savings out of that. Public Works Department there, $500,000. That's the usual amount that Ron's been giving to subsidize the roads that we the township roads that we have paved, over 53 miles of roads, township roads that we don't pave annually, but we're responsible for. Information services, $20,000 for a server replacement. Development services, talked about this last night when we approved the auctioning of the zoning vehicle that we are putting out for pasture as a 1997 Explorer. So we're getting a 2016 Explorer. And reimbursements, those are basically TIF, where you repay, make whole the school districts, and of course the auditor, treasurer, DTAC fees that are associated that they deduct. So for a grand total of $5.4 million in TIF expenses, and the revenues estimated to be about 4.4. So there's about $975,000 in, you'd say, out of reserves. But again, that's basically due to the firehouse that we've put that back, and now the rubber's meeting the road for the expenses for the firehouse. That will still leave an ending projected 2016 cash balance of nearly $1.4 million in reserve for the TIF, which when I came, if I showed you the beginning balance, I think in 2013, the beginning balance was like, when I first started, was like 1.5. So we're just real close to the beginning balance where we were. We just have set that money back for the firehouse. And basically, you know, at a glance, at a view, all the general fund, all the departments, everything, you know, just to sum it up, we're 7.7% cash change from what we're estimating in 15 versus what we're estimating in 16 to be the ending. And you saw there $975,000 of that was just, you know, related to TIF, mainly the firehouse, because that's about the amount we do. We have $1.2 million budgeted for the firehouse, including the potential debt service money for the firehouse. So spent quite a lengthy 13 pages discussing all the funds and the general fund and everything else. I'll entertain any questions.
Trustee Seavey.
Of course, the big question will come to us eventually concerning redevelopment and where we think we can pick up additional revenue to fill the holes inside the general fund, but those are still being determined. I don't have any other questions on it. Thank you.
No questions. Fiscal Officer Luby.
No questions.
Next, we'll bring up FAB member Brian Gilligan.
Thank you. Once again, we go over these quarterly with Administrator Landrum and the department heads. They're all there. Any questions we've had. I think even Ron yesterday said we found something he didn't know about. So what Administrator Landrum has taught us, what Fiscal Officer Luby has taught us, what we bring to the table. We've talked about the parks, which was earlier, about what it can do to the general fund over and over coming out of that. The firehouse has been a big thing the last few months when we've met. But when you look at all the numbers, we are confident and we are okay with everything that we see and would approve of what has been proposed for the administration budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll open it up for any public comment or questions. Mr. Capel.
Wouldn't expect me to sit here 2 nights and not say First of all, I'd like to thank all the department presenters for the 2016 budget presentation. Nice to know that you all expect your most recent levy dollars to last for the proposed time and possibly longer. In my opinion, Delhi leans to be fiscally conservative and well appreciate of all your efforts to stay on target. Thanks to Catherine, Jim, and Pete for putting up with all my requests for information in a timely fashion for your responses. Since I did not receive any response from any elected trustee, I can only hope you read the messages and Pete's responses. Next, I want to say that I agree with the decision to initiate the Pike redevelopment and the new TIF program. Although it is only calculated on the incremental increase in values of the parcels TIF'd in the 2015 list, it should produce a significant amount of TIF funds if the redevelopment plans proceed as projected. I want you to know I have a fair amount of understanding how TIF can be spent, can be used, and that 2000 and SIF cannot buy fire or police vehicles. Pete told me that he feels certain this will be corrected in future years. It was the same way in 1994, and it got corrected. But it's the 2006 TIF, or the new TIF, can't buy vehicles. I do have reservations about a JED. I understand it might be needed if you anticipate tax abatements to help developers and possibly future owners of parcels that decide to move to Delhi. I personally have been involved in some TIF or some JED issues with businesses. And all the ones that I were involved with declined to participate in a JED because they did not want their employees to pay income taxes. Just a simple decision for them. I do, on the negative side, I am against the extension of the 1994 TIF parcels for another 15 years, extending from 2024 through 2039, and I'm going to tell you why. I live in a condo that is a TIF parcel. Woodlands is all TIF. Katy Bud is all TIF. I have paid taxes for over 10 years, having lived in Woodlands that long, and none have gone towards your levy needs or towards reimbursing the general fund. There are many more parcels in Delhi that should be in the same terms of tax use for levies. Instead of all this ending in 2024, we'll extend to 2039. So all the money that we pay will continue not to help levies or the general fund. A similar situation for all 1994 tax parcels that produce $3.9 million in total TIF and $2.153 in school reduced TIF. The value of real estate that generates these amounts is about $24,297,280 in property values. If these parcels are released from TIF on the 2024 termination date, this real estate would become part of the normal levy base, in which case any renewal levy issued after that date or any new levy would encompass those parcels as part of the monies generated from the levy. Would have nothing, in a current levy, when they don't renew it and there's no change, you don't get more tax dollars. All you ever get is the dollars of the original levy. I believe that's correct. In comparison to the levies for the last 10 or 11 years, these would produce far more total dollars for the same levy millage, and reduce the need for more frequent operating levies and pressures on the general fund. And I heard about a lot of pressure on the general fund tonight. And the only way you're going to get money in there is to make more real estate available for that 0.65 or whatever it is amounts you get out of the taxes. I have asked multiple times if Pike redevelopment would eventually require additional operating levies and thus more funds. Consistently, the answer has been no. Last night, I understood police and fire will go 3 or more years before the need for more funds, and as operating departments grow and cost of living increases, there will be more pressure for additional funding at the operating level, and the Pike redevelopment TIF will cap the operating level funds at their 2015 level. Expending the old TIF for 15 years will exacerbate these needs rather than reduce them because of the continued TIF. Last, it may seem old-fashioned as a fund manager, me as an old fund manager, that you're hedging your bet by extending the old levy 15 years in case the redevelopment doesn't work. Put your decisions where you're projecting them to be. If you think the redevelopment's going to be huge for Delhi, you don't need 15 more years. You're going to have a lot more real estate value over there than you will by leaving the old 1904 TIF in. And you're only hurting your levies. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have closing comments. Trustee Seavey.
I'd like to thank all the department heads for their hard work through the year and finishing their budgets. Also compliment again the FAB for the second set of eyes, third, fourth, sometimes fifth set of eyes to review these budgets. It certainly makes it a pleasure to go through them with such ease and such transparency, as you can see it posted on the website. So thanks, everyone. It'll be a good year in 2016. It'll be a tight year like it has been in the past, but we've proven that we can operate within our budget. Thank you.
Fiscal Officer Luby.
Again, I'd like to thank the department heads as well. This can be a long and tedious project, so we do appreciate your time and effort that you do put into it. It does play a vital role to the township, so thank you.
And I'd just add, same thing I said last night to department heads and FAB. Thank you for all the work you do. Again, we only found out a few weeks ago that we're going to take a 19% increase in health insurance. You guys worked that into your budgets, absorbed it, and virtually came out with the same budget as previous years. And along with that, the shared services, now you're paying for 100%. And again, you virtually have the same budget. So good job, everyone. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thanks for being here.